The Biden administration fought to tear down the decades of progress women have made in athletics. Women have been stripped of their earned titles and live in fear for their safety in the locker rooms of America. Women like Riley Gaines, Lily Mullins, and Paula Scanlon, and so many other unspoken stories. Last week, the federal court ruled in favor of reality. Biden tried to rewrite Title IX, and his unconstitutional idea was rejected. Let's vote in favor of reality today. The Protecting Women and Girls in Sports Act clarifies the protections under Title IX and makes sure our women can continue to compete in fair and secure environments. It is an insult and utter disgrace to have them robbed of the triumph by a biological male. We're told that if this bill passed, President Biden would veto it. Well, Mr. Speaker, on November 5th, the American people vetoed the radical left's progressive agenda, and next week, America will return to common sense. I pray that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle remember common sense today in this very chamber. It is not complex, Mr. Speaker. God intricately created two genders for one reason. Men have no business competing in women's sports, nor being in their locker rooms.
I rise in fierce opposition to this bill. Trans Americans are not the problem. This obsession with monitoring kids' genitals is absolutely the problem. Let's be clear. This is about kids. My kids, your kids, all kids, even elementary school kids playing basketball. I'm a mom of two teens. I'm a former teacher. I know what kids are going through in school. They're already self-conscious about their bodies. They just want to be on the soccer field with their friends. They certainly do not want to be humiliated by members of Congress. So come on, let's talk about what enforcement looks like, because you guys, you don't want to talk about it. We know there is only one logical conclusion to this. This is interrogation of young girls about their bodies. This is asking people to show them what is underneath their underwear. That is what we're talking about. This is the logical conclusion for this bill. So it's vile, it's twisted, they don't want to talk about the details. It's an absolute invasion of children's privacy.
The gentlelady's time is
protecting
expired.
Anyone, it puts our children at risk. And actually, I urge colleagues on both sides of the aisle
time is
to
expired.
reject this government overreach. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 28 to prohibit federally funded schools from allowing men to compete in women's sports. Mr. Speaker, I find it truly staggering that we as Congress have to even consider such an issue, but here we are. Under the last 4 years of the outgoing administration, we have witnessed the imposition of a radical gender ideology that has disregarded the most fundamentals of biological principles with an expectation that Americans must redefine their perception and beliefs, no questions asked. We have stood by and watched as this administration and career D.C. bureaucrats have sought to twist and manipulate the meaning and purpose behind Title IX, which, if successful, would have disenfranchised the very women and girls that Title IX was meant to protect. Despite Title IX for over half a century since its inception, having paved the way for millions of women and girls, including myself, to achieve their dreams, its very existence has been consistently under threat on behalf of an unaccountable federal bureaucracy. It is past time that we as a government restore the sanity that has been lost over the last 4 years, and it brings me great pride to witness this critical issue at the forefront of the new Congress so that we may truly act upon the American people's mandate. As a co-sponsor of this bill, I want to thank Representative Stubbe, along with the Education and Workforce Committee, for their committed leadership on this issue, and I urge all my colleagues to support H.R. 28. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Oregon is recognized.
I now yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from California, Representative Jacobs.
Gentlewoman's recognized.
Thank you. It's honestly hard to know where even to start with this bill. Maybe let's start with the name. This bill doesn't even come close to protecting women and girls in sports. In fact, it puts all women and girls in danger of sexual abuse. And I hear my colleagues say, no, this wouldn't require genital exams. Well, let me tell you, we've already seen an investigation like this happen at a high school in Utah. And unsurprisingly, they wrongly targeted someone who wasn't trans. Because if this bill is passed into law, there is only a few ways to actually enforce it, and that is Genital inspections, that is asking young girls very inappropriate questions about their menstrual cycles. My colleagues know I'm 35 years old. I love talking about my period. I think it's important we talk about it. We shouldn't be making young girls answer these questions to people that they don't even trust. If this bill is passed into law, these kinds of secret investigations, shady questions, and surveillance of kids could happen all across this country. This does not protect women and girls. This only further jeopardizes their safety and security when they're playing in sports. This bill is sloppy, vague, and prejudiced. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today as a queer woman, once the only girl on my Pee Wee football team, a graduate from a women's college, in strong opposition to H.R. 28. This bill makes schools less safe for women and girls. It gives every teacher, coach, and parent an opportunity to police who looks feminine enough to play. It will put all girls at risk of intrusive questions and physical genital examinations, dissuading girls' participation in sports. And as LGBTQ+ youth continue to face attacks and targeting from extremist lawmakers in legislative chambers across the country and higher rates of depression and suicide, this bill is doubly dangerous. In my community, I meet young people and parents over and over who fled states like Idaho and Texas and Florida because they want to live in safe, welcoming communities where they know they have a future. Well, there are real problems impacting women's sports, including sexual violence, lack of equal resources, and pay inequality. This bill does nothing to address them. I urge all my colleagues to focus on addressing the pressing issues facing everyday Americans and to reject this hateful, partisan legislation. And I yield back.
This is the third week we're in the 119th Congress, and the third week that no bill is before us to lower costs for Americans. Before us, instead, is a political attempt to divide us as a nation, stigmatizing some kids so some adults can get MAGA merit badges. The Republican governor of Utah vetoed a similar piece of legislation after he shared that of the 75,000 students in high school sports in Utah, only 4 were trans and only 1 a girl playing sports. But he also mentioned the very real 86% of trans kids reporting suicidality due to things like adults stigmatizing kids for political gain. Instead, today, the proposed solution is in search of an actual problem, suggests we somehow ban girls from sports with some sort of process to determine who is a girl. Does this mean hiring potential predators to peek at the private parts of kids in locker rooms? Now that sounds like an actual problem to me. Creating a solution to a non-existent problem by creating a problem instead of lowering costs for Americans is a sign of an ineffective congressional majority at best. I urge a no vote. And I yield back.
As a mother to a former child athlete, I get the need to keep our daughters safe and to ensure school sports are fair. Sadly, there is nothing in this bill to improve the safety of our daughters or improve fair play. In fact, the bill subjects girls, cisgender, transgender, all girls, to harm and ridicule and strips fairness from players and parents and school communities. This bill sets up an unfair playing field where any parent can raise a concern that a transgender girl may be playing on a girls' team. And we know this is so very rare. It's unfair to the girls who may be targeted because they grow faster, play harder, or simply might be more talented than their teammates. This bill is unfair to the school districts who can't navigate the threats of lawsuits but also can't afford to lose federal funding, leaving students without sports or school meals. This bill is unfair to the girl athletes who could be subject to genital inspections and subject to humiliation, leaving them with a legacy of trauma rather than the lessons of teamwork and sportsmanship. Finally, this bill is unfair to the American people who are demanding that we take their call to address the cost of living seriously. I urge my colleagues to leave these decisions in the hands of parents and local sports authorities and vote no on H.R. 28. I yield back.